Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter. If you're just joining us, thank you for coming. Today, we're going to be discussing UBI. What is it? Why has it been sort of back in the news? What's the history? We're going to go over all of that. I think it's going to be a good show. On July 6th, that's this coming Tuesday, we're going to have on the deconversion or the deconversion of Nathan Digital Gnosis. Dyslexic. Give me a break. Digital Gnosis, and then on the 15th, which is I think the following Thursday, we're going to have the Christian apologetics of the Old Testament with Dr. Josh, which we are certainly looking forward to. And if you are here, please, and you could like and subscribe. It's a great way to help out the channel and help us to reach more people. The algorithm does in fact take that into account, so that's a great way. We also have a Discord. If you want to come in and talk to us after the show, hang out with us, talk about news, politics, culture, any of the normal topics that we cover, please come by and join us. We would love to have you. Now, in the wake of the COVID-19, wow, I'm on it today. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, there have been discussions about how to protect the economy, protect people at the height of social distancing from business closures, lack of income, lack of work. And the U.S. started, for the first time ever, really starting to honestly talk about UBI, Universal Basic Income. Most of us had never even heard of UBI until Andrew Yang and his presidential election in 2020. Where he strongly advocated for a UBI of $1,000 a month for every single American. UBI is a welfare system. It stands for Universal Basic Income, whereas the government gives everyone a basic income without terms or conditions. First known example of a UBI was Rome around 1100 AD, when Emperor Trajan gave 650 denarii to each Roman citizen. Sir Thomas More suggested that such a system would be crucial back in 1516. Thomas Spence and Thomas Paine also each advocated for some form of a UBI. The atheist philosopher Bertrand Russell said that it should be a vital component in any society. In 1969, spurred by a document signed by 1,200 economists, which called for a guaranteed income for every American citizen, and also spurned by bipartisan reports on poverty and the affluence of the average American citizen in this country, President Nixon proposed the Family Assistance Plan, which would provide families with a minimum income of $500 per adult and $300 per child. A number of countries, Canada, Italy, Mexico, Kenya, and Iran, have all tried some form of UBI. Tonight, we're going to have on two guests as we're going to sit down and discuss UBI. Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? The history, how it works. So please join me in welcoming Christopher Maute and Ethan Prolib. Let's see if, there we go. And Maute's isn't working, but you know what? I don't think anyone's going to tell the difference. Ethan, how are you?
Good evening, sir. How are you?
I am doing well, thank you. How about yourself?
I'm doing well.
That's good. All right. Finally got Maute's for you. I think he may have taken that personally. I could be wrong. Maute is subtle. To those of you who aren't familiar with Maute's brand of Italian subtlety, that's it.
Some would say passive aggressive.
I think some would. Some. All right.
Well, the smart ones.
Yeah. Oh,
you get it.
Yeah. So, gentlemen, how are you?
Quite well. Having a good time.
I
grilled so much protein in the past 3 hours. My family's going to eat well for the next few days. So I'm feeling good about that.
Good. I've got my Gatorade Zero, which is absolutely not an energy drink in a Gatorade bottle. So, Maute's just...
What do you have to hide? Why are you so defensive?
It's from you.
Who offended you to the point where you need to be so defensive?
that guy.
Mm.
It's not the offense. It's the
Oh.
bringing the show to a grinding halt. All right.
Oh no, it's like 8 o'clock. Yeah, that's the most appropriate time to be drinking an energy. Middle-aged dude, 8 o'clock at night, energy drink. That's what that fucking equation equals.
Yeah, that is that. You couldn't be more correct. So,
Hey man, own it. All I'm saying is own it. That's all I'm saying.
Oh shit! All right, so
Anywho.
UBI. What do you guys think? What's the first you've heard of it? Did you guys know what it was before Yang ran?
Who's going first?
I think he just
I want
volunteered.
you to go first.
You want me to go first? Yeah, I'd heard of it. We've had a universal basic income in this country for a long time. It's called Social Security, and people have gotten it. It was a crucial part of the New Deal, and it's something that we all pay into, and then we all receive once we reach either a certain age or there are ways you can get Social Security earlier than the determined age if you have certain disabilities or things can happen to you, health reasons essentially. But universal basic income is nothing new. What's new is the proposal that it's given to everyone. Well,
that's the universal part.
It's the universal part, but the issue is the difference between UBI and Social Security, which a lot of people get confused, is that Social Security is also something you're paying into. It's not something that's just given, right? The idea behind UBI is that everyone gets it. It doesn't matter if you're incarcerated, doesn't matter if you're 5 years old or 50 years old, doesn't matter if you're disabled, it doesn't matter if you're a billionaire, you would still get a UBI because it's a universal basic income. Now, everyone can qualify for Social Security once they reach the current age of 65, I do believe. But you can forego your Social Security or you can qualify for it earlier. But the reason it was such a crucial part of the New Deal, and the reason why it was passed, is because we were coming out of what is known by a lot of historians and economists as the Gilded Age. And there was so much money stuffed into the top part of the economy that people in the middle class and lower class, and there really wasn't a middle class at the time, that was a kind of an invention that happened after the New Deal, that they said, we have to get money to people. People need money. That's why loaning from the banks was backed by the Federal Reserve and the establishment of the Federal Reserve. It was all to get money out of rich people's hands and give it into poorer people's hands. It was literally wealth redistribution, which revitalized the economy. Now, World War II did help. I'm not saying that it didn't, but remember the New Deal was passed before that. And I think that if structured properly, go ahead.
Pause. All right. So my role is to be the foil, and it's to address, just like the unpacking of things. Like I accept most of your history, and on top of the problems that you and I have that we'll talk after the show, we won't address them right now, but I have some fucking problems with you. I want you to unpack.
Feelings mutual, but go ahead.
I'm not done. What is the difference between the way that you're explaining universal basic income and just socialism? Because I would think that they're two distinct categories.
They're not. They're not. Here's the problem.
Nick?
No, here's the problem. What people get confused.
What do you mean?
What people get confused is that people get confused and they think that socialism is a governmental structure. It's not. Socialism is an economic structure. There's no socialist form of government. That doesn't exist. It's not. Describe a socialist form of government. You can't, because it's an economic system.
Okay. I don't know if my question was answered. So you think? Let me try to unpack that. So the socialist economic strategy, as applied to politics, could be seen as a universal basic income. Am I understanding that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it would be part of one.
Sure?
Yeah.
No, I don't want sure. I don't want passive. acceptance. I would rather, like, I want you to make me understand it the way that you understand it.
Okay. A socialistic structure says that it's not enough for everyone to have access to the same opportunity. They have to have access to the same resources. Does that make sense?
So far, so good.
Okay. A capitalist structure says it's okay if people don't have access to the same resources as long as everyone has access to the same opportunities.
Resources versus opportunities. Okay? I'm getting it.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So a universal basic income is giving the equality of resources to the population on top of capitalism providing access to opportunity.
And the mechanism, and I'm not busting chops, I'm literally trying to wrap my head around this. And the mechanism for that would be taxation of people who are more wealthy?
Ideally, sure.
Mm-hmm. See, I genuinely don't have an argument against that, so I'm the worst devil's advocate for this particular point.
It's okay. It's all right.
Like, what is an argument?
I have one
against? Oh, okay, no. Hold on a second. I'll take.
Why take the money that they've earned? They've earned
economists.
They've earned the money. You can't take it from them. They've earned the money.
They've earned the money.
Exactly.
Is that an actual argument?
Oh,
that's the argument. that's
the argument.
Are you serious?
We didn't say it was a good one, but that's the argument.
That's the argument, yeah.
All right, so, okay. So maybe I don't understand. Maybe I don't understand the context where UBI is either accepted or controversial. So do you think you can kind of, like, you did a good job historically, like, Nixon and this and that and the other, and my critique was it just sounded like the social network that we already provide. So, like, why are people against UBI? Like, what's the strongest critique against it? Let's start there. What's the strongest critique against it?
Well, you're lucky because somebody in chat basically said the argument. All right, so I'm going to read this comment to you. Andreas Wolf says, in the real existing socialism, THEM, by the way, I think Andreas is being sarcastic here, but that's an aside. If you didn't work, you wouldn't get money. Ask everyone who lived in the USSR and the Eastern Bloc before 1989. Now, what Andreas is the reason Andreas is being sarcastic there is because that's not what happened, right? People who lived in the USSR before 1989 got money. They lived in a communist system. And what a lot of people do is they conflate communism with socialism. Socialism is fire departments. Communism is you must work in the fire department because this is where you grew up. And it's, I wouldn't say it's a caste system, but if there are need for firefighters in your neighborhood and you don't currently have a job, you're now a firefighter. Does that make sense? Well, I'm generalizing. So, obviously, I'm not being very specific, but that's the difference between communism and socialism. And people conflate the two. So they say, oh, if you're going to have socialism, then everyone's going to have to do. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh, yeah. I think what you said earlier makes a lot of sense. So when we talk about communism, that is essentially a political. Oh, now I'm starting to. Okay, it's essentially a political system. When we talk about socialism, it's an economic system, and the question is who owns the means of production. In a capitalist society, the means of production is owned by the corporations. You have private entities that are owned not by the workers, but are owned by, and I think I conflated. I think I switched the two. I'm on my game today.
No. No, it's okay. You're right. That's how. Here's my problem with that. I've had this argument so many times. You're right, but that's only half of socialism. It's the half of socialism that everybody centers on because it's the half that sounds like socialism is going to take capitalism away. Because the other half of socialism is that, yes, you can own the means of production in some forms. There's some means of production that you still wouldn't own, but let's just go with that. Let's just say that tomorrow all the workers own all the means of production, okay? The other half of that is that, okay, but also the workers are provided the means to live. There is no more poverty. There is no more people being without housing or without food. In a perfect socialistic economy, again, we're talking about utopias here. Go ahead.
I don't think this is a utopic short-term or long-term goal. My approach to UBI, and I'll be fully honest, and for those of you out there, I turned my volume up. I am blazing loud in my earphones, so
you can turn it down a bit. I turned up the gain. I turned up the gain on this end too.
I can hear your vocal cords rattle, but go ahead.
Yeah, you and me both. I can hear my teeth rattle as I speak. I'm so loud.
Yes.
Regardless. Turn myself down a little bit. So, God damn it, what were we talking about?
I'm sure it'll come to you.
Universal basic.
Just whenever
your
it comes to
understanding
you,
of UBI.
whenever it comes to you, you can just continue.
God damn it.
Just think about it for a few minutes. Nobody's watching.
Here,
Nobody cares.
I'll talk about.
You're doing fine. There's no pressure. Man. You're doing fine. It's just dead air.
Right.
I mean, nobody cares.
I lost my point. I got so focused on my volume, I lost my goddamn.
Did you have a point?
It'll come to me, and I'm going to interrupt you, and I'm going to be angry.
That's okay. You can. Anyway, what Maya says in the chat, she says the controversy is over how it's funded and what it does to inflation. Maya, you're absolutely correct. And what people who make that argument always forget is that we have the means to control inflation built into our economy. It's called the Federal Reserve. It's called the fucking Congress.
You wouldn't even need either of those two.
We already have the means to... I'm just saying, we have them baked into our economy already to control inflation. And people just forget. They're like, well, if you have a UBI, you're going to have a bunch of inflation. Sure. Well, if we have a bunch of inflation, we have ways to control inflation. So anyway.
If it happens, we could fight it, but UBI inherently would not. So the misconception there, I think, is that okay, you're adding a whole bunch of money, you're giving people more money, so now that they've got more money, it's going to cause inflation because you've increased the money supply. Now that they have
more money, I remember my goddamn point. Now that they have more money, they can actually buy food. All right, so here's the angle with which I'm approaching this. UBI to me seems utopic in this one vision. From a developmental psychology perspective, you expect to meet certain milestones and benchmarks, right? As a parent, we all understand what these physical development milestones are and how to achieve them, all the suggestions. There's a lot of money riding on trying to make that better. How do I make my babies smarter? How do I make their achievement better? Right? How do I improve from the baseline of regular milestone development? We still don't know how to improve it. We certainly know without a doubt how to bring it down, and that's through malnutrition, right? So if you want the surefire silver bullet way of decreasing intelligence, academic achievement, meeting physical developmental milestones, right? Malnutrition is that magic bullet. And to me, UBI is a path towards solving that problem. So that's the angle that I'm looking at this through.
May I also point out that I would disagree with one point. I think there is a way to improve intelligence. Increase interaction, increase a parent's presence with the child, and have the parent engage more often.
I'm with you. Okay, so
but that's
I'm happy.
UBI does both.
Keep going.
UBI does both. That one's actually applicable to UBI as well, because now, so I think I'm trying to remember. I think it was in Canada. They did. Let me find. There was a study in Canada. There was a UBI. Let's see. In Canada, Manitoba, Canada, between 1974 and 1979, they did a controlled trial of UBI. Only 5% of the people who were recipients of UBI stopped working, which is the big complaint. If you get money for nothing, right, why are you going to work? Only 5% stopped working. Of those, more than 80% stopped so they could take care of their children. People reduced their working hours on average by less than 10%. And most of them put that time either towards getting a better education to get a better job or just looking for jobs in general. There was an increase in graduation rates and a decline in doctor's visits and an 8.5% reduction in the hospitalization rate for that period in the people who had a UBI.
Sure.
Well,
I want to address something tied. No, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say an argument against what you just said is just it was just a barrage of numbers, and there's no way of determining, at least from the way that it was presented, whether those are either statistically or clinically significant increases or decreases. Right.
Love to hear from Ethan. Then I'll totally tear into that.
Right
Ethan,
on.
what were you saying?
Well, I want to address something that's in the chat. So why don't you talk about what Maute said first, and then I'll go back and address the question.
I also want to bring up inflation. So inflation is usually caused by people think it's when the money goes up, the prices goes up. That's actually true, but that's not when the amount of money that an individual has or any group of individuals has. It's when the money supply goes up. So if there's $1 billion in circulation, and then you add another billion to circulation and have 2 billion in circulation, everybody's 1 billion that they were holding on to has just lost half its value because you have twice as many bills out there. That's what happens when the U.S. prints, or any country prints currency. That's what causes inflation. If we were to pay for a UBI with printing money, then yes, inflation would go up. But if you don't print money to pay for the UBI, it shouldn't have any significant impact on inflation because you're not changing the amount of actual dollars that are out there. You're changing the redistribution through taxation, which is how it's normally, we already do that. And that's not what causes inflation. And then Maute's point is going to be complicated. So I do have $2 US from the Sinister Porpoise. Thank you, Sinister, for your support. We always appreciate that. I really appreciate the super chat and people and get people to stop devaluing education. Yeah. I think you're going to get a big round of agreement from everybody on the panel tonight.
Yeah. So Titan asked, how would Congress and Reserve control the inflation? And then Maya said right before that, I thought you were going to be serious. Congress doesn't do shit. All right. So let's talk about this real quick. So that was an excellent explanation, Nick. I would have said the exact same thing. So the Federal Reserve controls inflation by determining interest rates on loans specifically, and by determining what the base interest rates are, they can control how expensive it is to take out loans, specifically, and most importantly, long-term loans like home loans, auto loans. Auto loans aren't as significant, but home loans really are. If you're paying for something for 30 years, the interest rate matters a lot, right? If something happened, we had some sort of runaway inflation, Congress could, through its mechanisms, provide the means for the Federal Reserve to do other things to help control inflation. I'm not saying that they would. I'm saying that they could.
And I agree with everything you just said. So I think we're,
yes.
Well, Ed, okay, so to address Maute's point. So, I'm sorry.
Wait, hold on real quick. Maya says, sounds like a regressive tax. Yes, it is. It is literally a regressive tax. All tax is essentially regressive. I don't want to go into an economics lesson right now, but from a very high level, basically all taxes are regressive by the means of taxation. You're taking money out of the economy and using it towards some thing. And the higher the tax, the more regressive. The way that you combat that is by taxing higher earners more, and that is less regressive. Some people say it's a progressive tax, but since all tax is regressive, it's kind of a misnomer. But a progressive tax would be a tax which is less regressive and would be a tax on higher earners. So somebody who earns more, pays more in tax, whether it be a person, entity, or corporation. All right, go ahead, Nick. I'm sorry.
To address Maute's concern, in Manitoba, Canada, was a controlled trial with two groups. One group that got the UBI, another group that was monitored in the same province who did not get the UBI, and those numbers were relative to the other each group. Now, it was only one study, but I have here about 10 studies of different. That one was just one I wanted to bring up because that one specifically talked about the ability of parents to actually spend more time with their children because of the UBI. The interesting thing about the UBI, I think Ethan gave the best example of it, and I think technically, it's Social Security is not a UBI because it's not universal. But I think we're going to fudge a lot on what is technically. Yeah, exactly. He's right. It's the exact same thing. It's just there's a condition which is.
That's At some level, that's the crux of the argument. Like, how universal is this?
Yes. I think yes.
The universality of the basic income. Like, basic income is one argument. Universal basic income is a different category.
Well, and basic presumably means it covers actually all your base living expenses, which is not what Andrew Yang had on the table. He had $1,000, which isn't enough even to hit the poverty line. But if you were at the poverty line, which is $18,000, and you got $1,000 a month, that's a 65% increase in your income, which has a much greater impact on you than it does the millionaire who's getting. I mean, that's revolutionary to somebody who's at that level. Mm-hmm. So here's the basic proposal, which is you could say Social Security for all. It's just like Medicare for all is the universal health care. Social Security for all. The idea is every American citizen would get a set amount, presumably enough that you could barely, but nonetheless, eke out a living. So the good news, presumably that's going to happen. First of all, people can start to look for jobs that they find interesting. Instead of having to go to the first job that'll take you because you need to eat, whether you're good at it or not, whether you're qualified or not, you get to actually take the time to look for a job. You get to take the time to get better educated. Welfare right now.
That seems like a leap. It
does seem like a leap, but compare it to the current homeless. So this would replace, first of all, think of what this would replace. This would replace Social Security. It would actually expand Social Security, but you wouldn't pay Social Security on top of it. So Social Security would be
you're
gone.
All over the place. Like, I don't know what point of yours to address first. Like, you're
trying to address 6 at once.
Scattershot.
So
I am made.
Do you want to talk about how it would be paid for, or what presumably it would accomplish? Because those are two interesting questions.
I think that those are you're in the weeds, brother. You're in the weeds.
All right.
I still want to understand why a strategy of universal basic income is a better strategy than not universal basic income. Super basic. Let's take a step back. How are these strategies working in the overall? Now, I will make this one point. I am charmed by the way that you guys are talking about how this doesn't exactly scale. And I think that this is part of the communication problem. The communication problem is everyone's going to get a set amount. When everyone gets a set amount, it almost assumes that everything scales. Oh, well, the people at this end of the scale getting that set amount are going to enjoy it as much as the people on this end of the scale that are getting this set amount. And that's not the case. From what I'm hearing, you're saying the people on the lower end of the scale that are getting this set amount, this is a game-changing behavior that could restructure the middle class, which is the economic engine of capitalism. Are these fair assumptions that I'm making here? These connections that I'm making?
Yep, I think so.
All right. So so this is the part that I'm charmed about, because I think this is the part that this is the worst part to communicate, because everything is like averages, set amount, this, that, and the other. And the argument should be like the changing a trajectory by 1 degree here, which is at 60 miles where it lands. Like, that should be the way that this should be framed almost. And it's not. It's framed as set amounts equal equality, distribution. Sorry about that. And I think that's a misleading signal to most people who are hearing this. I think people are tone deaf to how much this matters to people on that end of the spectrum, on the lower SES. So I've already talked too much. You guys riff off of that.
Those are great questions. First of all, I think the big thing to remember is what Nick was saying about how transformative it would be for lower wage workers, right? If right now you're making $15 an hour, which is not even $30,000 a year, it can be difficult to find somewhere that will rent an apartment to you if you're a single income earner. Adding $1,000 onto your income would make it, you'd be able to rent at places that you couldn't rent right now, because you'd say, well, I'm guaranteed to have $1,000 a month to pay for this rent, and my job goes to pay for my car payment and my car insurance and my cell phone and my Netflix and my food and all the things that people do every day. So I think that what a lot of people think of when they think of universal basic income is, well, this means lazy people won't work, right? Well,
that's
let's say it's
that's the go-to critique.
Or buy drugs and alcohol.
So what is your go-to?
Buy drugs and alcohol.
Or what is your go-to counter argument?
Who cares? Why are you so worried about whether or not other people are working?
No, that's so.
That's my question, and I've never gotten a good answer for it. Why does that matter?
It matters because being able to account for freeloaders or free riders on an economical system makes it more efficient. It doesn't mean that you have to eradicate them. It just means that in the way that you're going to incorporate them, you need to at least be aware of at what % they're draining your goal.
But what's the goal?
I mean, that's it depends on whatever social system you're working on, right? Or
sure,
maybe,
and that's the issue. Is
more appropriately economic. Let's stick to economics, right? Because we can talk social psychology, we can talk social psychology, but I think this is more of an economic argument. Fair? So.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that sticking with the idea that Nick, you're loud. Mute yourself.
Oh, sorry, I must be on.
There you go.
There we go.
Sticking with the economic argument, being able to account for what % of society is going to free ride determines how efficient your system is. And some would say that one of the goals is to have as efficient a system as possible, or at least as nimble a system as possible to deal with an ever-changing landscape. But for that, even for those reasons, you need to know what % of free riders you're accumulating.
Well, here's the other thing. If you're guaranteed $1,000 a month, you're going to be far less likely to take a job that pays you minimum wage, which is what, $7.25 right now? Most places know that you can't pay. If you try to pay people $7.25, no one's going to come work for you. So a lot of people are paying, $8, $9, $10 an hour right now as a minimum, even higher than that. And I think a lot of people are afraid because if there's a UBI out there that pays $1,000 a month, no one's going to take shitty waiter jobs for $2.13 an hour plus tips. Like, no one would work them. And these small business owners are saying, well, you can't have a UBI because then I won't be able to get any workers. And I have to say to them, stop exploiting people. Maybe the issue is that you need to find a way to pay people more money.
If that business goes under,
we can't bring the floor of the economy up.
Yeah, and if that business goes under, that's kind of sad, but the owner isn't going to go under because he's covered by the UBI too.
Correct.
So it's not like a small business owner is saying, I'm going to go under if I can't pay good wages to people. I don't want them to go under, but they're not. They now have a safety net as well. So everybody's covered by the safety net as opposed to unemployment insurance, which only covers some people. They have to have been recently employed. Doesn't cover the homeless. All of these people are now covered by this. And if your business goes under, you're still covered by this.
And I think a lot of people, why they are working to get to the top of the economy. Wouldn't it be great if right now all of us had a YouTube channel that was generating $15,000 a month for us? That would be fantastic, right? Well, I want you to think about for a moment, why would that be fantastic? It'd be fantastic because you'd be able to pay all of your bills, be able to do all of the things that you want to do every day without the fear of losing your home, of not being able to afford food at the end of the week. I can't put gas in the car to go to work.
It's fuck
and
you
so
money. You're essentially like it's fuck you money.
Well, it's enjoying life.
Sure.
It's enjoying life. Oh well, no, I'm sorry. Working would then be the getting something out of life other than just sustaining. But yeah,
right. And what people say right now is, well, a job is what provides you fulfillment in life. Well, if that job doesn't allow you to eat when you're hungry and keep a roof over your head reliably and take the dog to the groomer when the dog needs to go to the groomer, all the things that you do in life, then you aren't getting fulfillment over it. Then the job's just really adding stress to you. And so my biggest argument for the UBI is that it'll make more people happy.
Which so far, again,
so that's a pragmatic argument.
It is,
right?
But it's my best one.
Fair enough. I like that. I need to play with it because there are so many holes in it that I want to poke, but I think that I'm not smart enough to poke brand new holes in it, right? So I'm afraid that whatever critique I have, you've heard so many times.
I'll go after him. I'll go after him. That'll be fun.
Please do. Go for it.
Let me chew on this for a second. Let me chew.
Let me, Sinister Porpoise, $2. Thank you again, Sinister, for your second super chat. We really appreciate that very much. Sinister Porpoise says, and get people, get people to stop. I think it was that AI is going to, where is that? Technological progress makes UBI inevitable. Any thoughts or comments on that, anyone?
Yeah, I've heard that argument a lot, and I disagree because I think that the ruling capitalist elite class has found ways to make excuses for why poor people should stay poor for centuries and centuries and centuries, and they will continue to find reasons to make arguments. Think about this. In the next 2 weeks, there are 2 billionaires going to space. And there's a bunch of people that will never be billionaires that are cheering them on, and they're super happy about it. And I'm like, yeah, great. It's fantastic. You want my biggest argument for the UBI is that Richard Branson's going to space and people can't fucking eat. I'm just saying.
So some would say there shouldn't be billionaires.
Yeah, I'm one of them.
Yeah, there are plenty of people who say that. And yeah,
I'm one of them.
Well, hold on a second. So let's go back to your question, Nick. You're saying that the question that was brought up in chat is that AI will deem UBI necessary?
I had said AI was technology. So the idea that eventually all of the menial jobs will be taken up by AI and there won't be enough jobs for the number of, I think if she's using the argument, I think she is, there won't be enough jobs for the number of human beings on the planet. So you will have to find some There's
a story I want to tell real quick that adds on to this, and then I'll let you go, Chris.
Please.
So there was a group of CEOs about 4 years ago, and they were touring a factory in China that was making these robots. And the factory owner was showing how these robots could basically replace all of the people in all of their factories. They could have completely automated factories within like 10 years. They weren't there yet. And the CEO of Ford said, here's my problem with your technology. If I implement this in all of my factories, who is going to be able to afford to buy a Ford? And I've always loved that story.
Wait a minute. What's that? You always like that.
In other words, if the robots have all the jobs and no one's making any money, who's going to have money to buy cars? That was his argument, or his question, I guess.
Well, that's the whole Ford model, wasn't it?
I think it was. It used to be, at least. I don't know about today.
Like, I want to pay my employees enough to buy the thing that they're making.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that was
charitable
Mr.
way.
Ford's original idea.
I'm not trying to retro, make this dude a legend in a way that he's not.
He's definitely not.
He's an innovator. He's an innovator in that way.
Yeah.
Clear boundaries.
Yeah.
Clear boundaries.
Yes.
Because he was also an asshole.
More than an asshole, but yeah. Yeah.
Bigot.
Yeah, I have very few good words to say about that gentleman.
Really?
So, well, hold on. Before we go down that rabbit hole, an argument against capitalism is the idea that there will always be a class of work that needs to be done by grunts. And inherently, with that, baked into that capitalist system, you are developing social classes such that there are some people worthy of doing the less grunty things and people, that deserve to be doing the grunty things. How does UBI cut through that bullshit?
All right.
Or doesn't
I want you to picture in your head the Verizon headquarters. Okay. It's a big building. It's a big, tall building. And at the very top are all the executives. And somewhere in the middle is the call center, right? Tomorrow, there's a stomach bug. All the executives get the stomach bug and none of them show up to work. Does anyone notice? Probably not. I mean, some meetings get rescheduled. The next day, everyone in the call center gets the stomach bug. None of them show up to work. Do you think that would go unnoticed? And yet,
nope.
We value those executive jobs way above all of the jobs that are being done at the call center. I think that all work has equal value. And I think that whilst there are more jobs that are more, all work has equal value.
I'm going to push back against that.
All work has equal value.
I think that all work has value. So how is it that all work has equal value? If we're going to,
because all work,
if we're going to compare contrast an accountant versus a firefighter, right? And by the way, I feel like I'm walking into a trope. Like I feel like I'm walking into the most intuitive counter argument that you are ready for.
I am, but please go ahead because this will be fun.
No, that's it. Just to compare contrast, like that would be my like. Okay, so you set off a red flag. Okay. I'm willing to change my position on this, but my go-to is like an accountant versus a firefighter. They're equal.
I think it's great. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Justify
Let
that
me explain.
As a warranted belief.
Yes, please. Sure. Okay, so firefighter, important job. Your house is on fire. You need it taken care of, right? You could lose your house. You could lose your literally the people in your family might die if the firefighter doesn't show up to help you get that fire out, right? That's fucking important. Right? What happens if you mess up on your taxes?
Marty's house less so. Mine, yes. I agree.
Fuck both of you.
What happens if you mess up on your taxes? What happens if you mess up on your taxes? What happens if your accountant messes up on your taxes? Could you lose your home? Could you lose your family? I mean, maybe they're not in danger of dying per se, and it probably wouldn't be immediately.
You could. If they were super duper corrupt, but there are ways of remedying a shitty accountant in a way that there aren't for a burnt down goddamn fucking house.
Sure.
Right?
My point is that all work.
That's my point. No, you don't get to like passively dismiss that as like, yes, well, of course that's true. No, that's my point. That it is true is my point. That is the distinction between the value of the work of an accountant versus the value of the work of a firefighter.
But here's the problem. And hi, Joe, how are you? Here's the problem. When we start denoting that some work isn't valuable, that's when we're like, well, it's okay for you to $2.13 an hour plus tips to do that job.
That's different. Now that you're showing your
it's
hand,
not.
That's just a slippery slope argument. Oh, come on.
Yeah, and also,
finish your point. Hold on, Joe. I want Ethan to be able to finish his point because I think that I'm good. I think that Joe has a shit ton. What do you mean? You're good.
I want Joe to go ahead. Because we'll be here for 4 hours at this point. So, Joe, go ahead.
Escape hatch. I can't wait to scream at you after the show, Ethan.
It's going to be back on for after the show, I think.
Well, see, two things. One, I mean, it's very easy to calculate the value of some work, and some work is less calculable. But to say that it's all equal is actually demonstrably false. But beyond that, what you said a second ago, I thought was a little dishonest, because you said when you say some work has no value, that's not the question. The question is to what degree is it valuable? So here's the thing. I am an employee. I'm an employer. I have a business. I don't think anyone else here really does. I classify work as two types of things. There's producers and there's facilitators. Producers are the people who actually make the widget, whatever the widget is, or perform the service, whatever the service is. Facilitators make it possible for the producers to do their job. There's people who have to get there's like the people who send the invoices and the people who get the bills paid. They're not producing any actual product that has any monetary value, but you could not get by without them. You need them. They're essential. The admins, basically all the people who do the work, who keep the lights on and all that has a value. Even though they're not producing anything, it has a value. But it's easy to see. You could actually calculate what the contribution is of the people who are the facilitators versus the people who are producers, because you can say, okay, if the producers had to stop what they were doing and do this other thing, how much would you lose? And so you could very easy to calculate that. It doesn't come out equal. That's not to say that the facilitators have no value. They have a lot of value because you need them. You can't get by without them, and you would produce less without them. But the idea that
my lab needs technicians. I need people to wash bottles and prepare samples.
Sure, that's right. The person on the factory floor who's making the widget is producing more value than the person who sweeps up. That doesn't mean we should treat the person sweeping up like crap, which is what we do currently, unfortunately. And that's not even inherently necessary, even in a capitalist system. The problem is we allow it to happen because we undervalue, we don't see the value in it. The other problem we have is that we effectively, you talked about the restaurants only, paying $2.13, which I agree with you is atrocious. Is we're allowing ourselves to be fooled into tricking ourselves to think that the cost of that food is less than it really is. So the restaurant charges a lower amount. They only pay a small amount, and then we make up the difference. Well, if we're not assholes, we make up the difference in tips. But the thing is that so the food actually really costs more than what we're being charged. We're just allowing this subsidy, this kind of hidden subsidy. Now, as far as the AI thing, this is something I want to get to real quick. We're not even close to that. I work in automation. That's what I do. I've been in automation for 30 years. We're not even close to automation pushing out all the jobs. I know this because I go in plants and I see places that either have no automation, have very archaic automation, and it's difficult to get them to spend the money that they need. Plus the fact that installing and maintaining automation requires people, skilled people. So we're not even close to this thing. So that's a couple of things that I wanted to get off my chest real quick. Because I was making my head explode.
Nobody wants your head to
Well, where do you
explode,
want me to
Joe.
start?
Welcome,
At
Joe.
the
I'm glad your
beginning.
head hasn't exploded.
Go.
Thank you for joining us. And Ethan, pick and choose, my friend. Choose wisely, because Marty's got.
Yeah, that was a lot.
too.
That was a lot.
Yeah.
I'll start at the end. I agree with you. I don't think I think we're 50 years from a fully automated society. I do. I don't think it's a danger tomorrow. Definitely, robots have put a lot of people out of work, though. I mean, we can say that. I mean, there's a lot of robots doing work today that weren't doing work 100 years ago. And some of it's good because some of those jobs were way too dangerous. And I'm glad that people aren't doing that job. I wish that there were those jobs available because they pay pretty well. You know, I like what you say about facilitators.
Those robots
and
need to be maintained. Those robots need to be maintained. That's a different job.
Sure. But that's a job of 1 to 10 and, you know, replacing jobs of 100 to 500, you know.
Different argument.
I agree. I understand also, Joe, what you're saying about facilitators versus doers. I forget the word that you used, but I liked it.
And producers.
And producers, right. I think what happens a lot of times is people who are producers become high-level facilitators, and they remember that when they were producers on the low end, it was tough for them, so it should be tough. So it's okay that it's tough for people now. And I think that's such a mistake, because I think it's our job as we get older and the generations come behind us, it's our job to make sure that the generations behind us have it easier than we did. That's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be leaving a better life behind, not the same life, and most certainly not a tougher life. And when I say all work has equal value, I know that it's an unprovable point. And that's how I was going to finish the statement, but I wanted you to go first. I can't prove it. It's not something I can justify.
It's not.
It's
a non-demonstrable. Okay, so that's been a good. Yeah,
it's not demonstrable. I don't have a way to sit down and hold on real quick, and then I'm going to let you go. I don't have a way to sit down and prove it. The reason that I like it, and the reason that a lot of people like me, who agree that people aren't getting paid enough, like to say it. It's the same thing like defund the police or Black Lives Matter. It's a rallying cry to say Black lives do matter and they aren't mattering enough, right? The police are being called to do jobs they shouldn't be called to do. We want to get some of that funding and put it towards mental health assistance. And when I say all work has equal value, it's because there are so many jobs out there that right now have no value in our system, or so little value that someone can be doing them and not earn enough to live. And so it's not something that's easily justifiable. It's more about the rally.
I would amend your statement slightly, and I think it would work. I think if we say all workers have equal value, that I could get behind. That I can get behind.
You sound like a socialist.
That's an interesting. Well, so do you. Most people.
I am. Well, that's the funny part, because when I talk to right wing types and they accuse me of being socialist or communist, I'm like, no, dude, I'm an actual capitalist. I have a business. I started with my own money, blah blah blah. And I ask them if they have a business, and they say no. And I say, oh, so you're just a fan of capitalism? I'm a practitioner. But I agree with your other point too, that there are a lot of people who have the mentality that, well, I struggled, so everyone else should have to struggle too, and that is regressive. That's a regressive attitude, and it is unfortunately pervasive. That's actually what motivates me in my business, because I remember what it was like being the person on the other end of the equation, and I remember all the ridiculous things that management told me to do, things they made me put up with, and I thought, gee, I don't want to create that environment in my company because I know how horrible it was. I remember, like, when I got fired from my very last job, though I was working for somebody else, not counting my contracting job that was in between. When they let me go, I was relieved because the job sucked that bad, and I was getting paid a decent amount, but the work environment was just so terrible that I was like, whew, yay, I'm free. So what I actually try to do in my own company is to not make those same mistakes, to add more flexibility, make sure that everybody's getting paid decently, make sure that everyone's gets a chance to express themselves. They're heard and their concerns are met. So for that reason, I've actually, the only person who left on their own accord was somebody who had to leave the country to go home to deal with family matters. No one has ever quit my company. I've had to get rid of a few people, but no one's ever quit because they like their job.
Yeah, and I think that I had this salesperson one time who was under me at a job, and she was working so hard. She finally got her first sale and got a really good commission, got like a $500 commission. And I was congratulating her afterwards. She was young; she was early 20s, and she said, "I said, I'm sure you're really happy." She said, "Yeah, I'm going to have gas to come to work next week." And I always think about that whenever somebody, you're not talking about giving people money so that they can do drugs and go buy hookers and all of this stuff. People want to earn money just to live. And she ended up being one of the best people at that store. She was there for over a year, and she was so fantastic, such a good person. And a lot of the times when people are working these jobs that are menial and aren't making enough money, what they're doing every single moment that they have any downtime is looking for a better job. And if more people at the top would just pay the people at the bottom better, they would have less turnover. They'd have less training time. And that's why I like the UBI, because it picks up that floor and it raises up the floor of the economy.
Can I throw a curveball in?
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, Joe, no, you go ahead. Finish your point, Joe.
Well, I think we will get to the point where UBI will actually become necessary eventually. I don't think we're there yet, but I do think that there's the one thing about UBI I like is the idea that it's not there's not some sort of weird, like really complicated formula to decide what you get and whether you get it and all that. I think it could be a good replacement for a lot of the support things we have right now, and would, in the long run, if you combined all the various assistance programs that we have, and you turned it into UBI, just the fact that would be simpler, would cost less, and then you could actually give out more money to help people. Although the one thing I have against it though is like, okay, I'm doing reasonably well. I don't want or need the $1,000. I really don't. And I think that would be, I'd rather have it go to people who need it more than go to me, because I don't need it. I'd like it to be there if I fall on hard times, but I don't think while I'm doing perfectly fine that I should be getting that tax money. That I'd rather that go to somebody who's underemployed or not employed or employed, struggling, whatever.
What if access to it was universal instead of distribution of it being universal?
Right? I think that would be better.
In other words, if you don't need it, you don't take it, right? But you have access to it.
Right. Yeah. It's like taking a tax credit.
Well, that's the also that's the negative. It's the negative income tax essentially, actually, which is below a certain point, you actually get money back on the income tax. You don't pay income tax; you get paid back on income tax, which would be negative income tax, which is essentially. And I want to pick up on that point real quick, because Biden has actually proposed a $300 child tax credit, which some people are saying would functionally be similar to a UBI. And that's how I would like the UBI structured. It would come as part of your paycheck as a negative tax refund. It would be based on, whether or not you decided to take it each year. When you fill out your form at an employer and you put down your deductions, there would be another line that would say, do you want the UBI? And you would check that if you wanted it. That's how it would come in. We aren't talking about, some giant new governmental structure that would be installed that would distribute this. It would just be distributed through your yearly tax forms. Well, and keep in mind,
the idea is new.
Sure.
Nope.
Sure.
Right. And the curveball that I wanted to throw into it is, what about creative people? Like musicians, artists,
Those assholes.
right? Fuck you.
Maybe.
What would happen to society if there was a UBI and people who are like creative content creators just were able to output wonderful creativity, right? Like, what would happen to society if there was a robust artistic component? I think I think that's a fun way of looking at UBI, because most people are looking at it from an eco or political perspective. Like, no, you're giving an opportunity for things to blossom in society that could radically affect society, like the arts, right? So I don't know. Do you guys have any opinions about that?
Listen. I've been acting since I was 5 years old.
That is my favorite way to start a sentence. Listen.
I went.
Listen. What choice do I have, you fucking chooch?
Oh.
I've been acting since I was 5 years old. I went to a performing arts middle school, a performing arts high school. I was a dual major in college, political science.
Please continue.
And
sorry, we have technical difficulties.
Political science and communications. And the communications was a minor in theater. So I got paid to act the first time when I was 16 years old. It was an absolute thrill that I was paid to go on stage. It was, I still have the visor. I could go get it. It's in the other room. I got paid again in college. I did a play and got paid at a festival to perform. I was in a band. People know that I was in a band for a couple of years as a lead singer. I made a bunch of money. Well, not a bunch of money, but we got by for a couple of years until the band broke up, as they often do. But, I think back, if there had been a UBI, would I have continued acting? Would I have just pursued that as a career? Would I have continued pursuing music as a career? I think about that a lot. And I want that opportunity for other people. I didn't have it, right? I had to go do big boy stuff. And
and that's the deterrent.
Right? I agree.
That's what prevented me from being an artist. Like, I couldn't handle the mindset. Like, I'm bipolar. The fucking last thing I want is like a landscape of earning income that is just like filled with landmines. Haha, musician, here's a gig that you might get, but music industry being what it is, you might not get it, right? Fuck,
probably won't, actually.
Fuck it.
Oh, God.
Fuck that noise.
Remember the first time, I'm going to tell you a really quick story. First time we ever met with any radio executives, right? They sat us down. We was at this festival, and there was some guys from RCA, and they came to us afterwards. They were like, we listened to your demo album. We really like it. We're like, oh, yeah, thanks. They were really nice to us. And an hour after the meeting, my lead guitarist comes up to me. He's like, hey, those guys came to me after you and literally offered me a contract. And listen, I wasn't one of those guys that was like super jealous or anything, but those slimy fucks sucked our dicks for an hour and didn't mean a word of it. They just wanted our lead guitarist. Anyway.
Let me interrupt real quick. Let me interrupt.
And I told him to do it, by the way.
Real quick, just because $2 super chat, and it's been about 10 or 15 minutes. So I wanted to... $2 super chat from Remember Sammy Jenkins. Sammy Jenkins, thank you very much for that super chat. We really appreciate it. Let's see. He says, if you throw pennies, the monkey dances. That's not funny. That's really not. Big love, Sammy Jenkins. Thank you, Sammy, for the $2 super chat. Yes, yeah, I think he's talking about me. All right, yeah. I think I'm ashamed.
Yeah. So now, as far as the creative people, I think that would be a very good thing, because you're right. There are a lot of people who are very creative who, it's very difficult to make it with any kind of art. There's a lot of it has to do with connections way more than it has to do with your talent. And so there's a lot of people who with lots of talent
currently
who can't pursue it or don't get anywhere because they don't make the right connection and they can't support themselves with And despite the romantic notion of
hold
an
on a
artist,
second,
an
Joe.
artist.
Hold on, Joe. I just want to pause you for a moment because, like, I don't mean to slow down your momentum, but like, you've seen me perform live, right? You've been to my gigs,
Yes.
and you're a singer, right? Like, you were part of like a choral group
In
when
college.
you were in college, right?
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
get like the music thing.
Yeah, and I don't. And while we have this romantic notion of artists, struggling, and starving for their art, I don't think that's actually a good model to have, as a general rule. So I think it would be great. The one thing that I think needs to happen before we could have a UBI and might potentially make UBI not as necessary, but is our tax policy is terrible. We used to have much higher taxes on the upper incomes. And here's the thing. The purpose of those high taxes is not necessarily to collect the money. When the tax rate was 91%, not a lot of people actually paid 91%. What it's for, it's a deterrent for keeping that much money, for keeping that big of a piece of the pie. The purpose is and this is something as an employer, there's times when it's like, well, okay, I could keep that next dollar, but it's going to be taxed into oblivion, or I could give it to my employees who are going to pay a much lower tax rate, and I get goodwill, get happier employees. I wasn't going to get that money anyway. So, or I could invest it in my business. I can buy new equipment or send my employees to training or whatever. And I have
Joe, now you're getting into an incentive strategy. Like, what incentivizes people to do this, that, or the other? And those incentives in economics are actually social psychology questions.
Yeah, and so what happens is the right wing likes to convince us that, well, if we don't tax the rich, that they'll just automatically hire more people and spend more money. And history says that's actually the opposite of what happens. We know
I'm sorry, I can't hear you over the sound of Jeff Bezos going to space.
Yeah. We know from the last big tax cut what happened. There were stock buybacks. They didn't hire more people. They didn't raise wages, and this is what's really kind of pisses me off is that they'll say giving money to poor people is a disincentive to work, but somehow giving money to rich people is an incentive. And it's like, well, which is it? It's incongruous. And the thing is that normally the way our system has generally worked in the past is that incentives were for things you had already done. So it's like, okay, if you, like I said, you hire that other worker or you spend some capital money on new equipment or training or whatever, and then you get a tax break because you did the good behavior. The incentive, it was the carrot that was out there, and you had to perform the action to get the carrot. But just having a huge tax cut is giving people carrots and expecting that they're going to perform the action, and they don't because they don't have to. Plus the fact that a tax break can never result in a big employment boost because that's not how employment works. If you cut my taxes in half, I'm not going to hire another employee. I'm going to do that based on demand. If the amount of work coming in demands that I need additional employees, I'll hire somebody. But if I don't have enough work, I'm not just going to hire more people just because I have more
employees milling around. Just pay somebody, $20 an hour to just hang out in the office.
Yeah, it's
I would love that. I accept.
Yeah, okay,
I accept, Joe. I will do that for you. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, no doubt, but that's not, you at the best, it might help in the margins. Like, let's say you were thinking about hiring somebody, you couldn't quite afford it, and you got some money back, and maybe, but that's marginal. That's nowhere near as much as bottom up, because we know we have a demand economy. So if the spending classes have money to buy goods, they spend them because they have no choice. They need stuff, and then that creates demand, and then people call up, my customers and to buy stuff, and then they call me to help make their stuff work better.
And thank you for listening to this TED Talk. Fucking Joe Serious Mind, laying down logic.
Listen.
As an employer,
I didn't hear a thing. I got hung up on social psychology as a science, my brain shut down after that one. I don't.
Fuck everybody. And we can talk about p-hacking all night. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then you don't know what the problem is with fucking social psychology.
Well, okay, so now did I cut anybody off, or was that I must have, or I meant to cut Maute off? He's the only one I don't care.
I just said one last thing about that.
Please.
So basically, part of what I was getting to is that so we need to raise taxes because that will shift the income base down on its own. But secondly, in order to pay for UBI, we're talking about $4 trillion a year currently, and even if you count in the credit back, the fact that you get rid of other programs that would, the other aid assistance program, you're still talking about an additional $2.5 trillion a year, $2.5 to $3 trillion a year. So that money's got to come from somewhere, which means you have to tax people making the top end a lot more than we do.
Yeah, so the numbers that I saw was actually $5 trillion to pay for a real UBI where the bottom is actually taken care of. That's $5 trillion, which is a huge amount of money. But keep in mind how much we just passed on the COVID bailout, so we're certainly capable of it. But yeah, when you get some of that money from other sources that you wouldn't need anymore, Social Security, all these other things, and then when you take into account the fact that most people who get that money, the vast majority, what they're going to do with it is they're going to spend it. So it's going to go right back into the economy. They're not saving it. The billionaire is going to save it, but that's not the problem. The people who need it are going to be spending it. That's going to raise the GDP, and that will lower the impact of those expenses back down to about $2 trillion, which is still a lot. That is still a lot of money, and there's like either value-added tax or a consumption tax. There's any number of ways to do it. So let's not say that $2 trillion isn't a lot of money, but if you think about what we're getting out of it, when you think about how much we spend on things that we don't necessarily, the military, which more than all other militaries combined is how much we spend on them. So Maute wants to say something, so I'll zone out for a minute.
I have a question for Ethan.
Oh, God.
Are you ready? First, I fucking hate you, ready. And I can't wait to fucking scream at you after we're done.
Yeah, I know. I don't blame you.
Gentlemen, real quick.
There's a
show starts.
I'm not done.
Baggage on the floor. Show starts. Have a good show. At the end of the show, pick up your baggage and go right back the way you were. But right now,
fuck out of here.
Show, gentlemen. Adulting.
And Joe,
thank you.
Just so you know, I mock hate Ethan. Just so you know, because if Joe thinks that I genuinely hate you, Ethan, you're dead. Anyway, I needed to make sure that I called off my guard dog right there. That being said, Ethan, what would you do if you were a billionaire? Right? Because earlier we talked about like there shouldn't be billionaires. If you did have command of $1 billion, how would you do it different? Like give me 5 to 10 minutes on that.
Okay.
Seriously.
It's so funny you said that. No. It's so funny you said that because I was thinking about the other day I should do a stream where we sit down live, me and the chat, and we try to spend $1 billion. We just see how hard it is to spend $1 billion. How hard is it? I think that there have been a couple of people
after you feed
recently
everyone.
who have given us after you feed everyone that have given a good direction of how to do it, of how to give away your money. Warren Buffett has given away a shit ton of money. Bill and Melinda Gates have given away billions and billions and billions of dollars. I have a lot of work history in the nonprofit space, several different types of nonprofits. And I think there's a right way to do nonprofiting and there's a really wrong way to do nonprofiting. I'm not going to call anybody out. I'm not going to name any names, but I think there's one in the news recently that would be a prime example of the not. And I think charities are a phenomenal way to impact communities personally, because frequently, and I'm talking about very small charities, I'm talking about local food kitchens, I'm talking about local women's shelters, I'm talking about programs that give shoes to inner city kids. I think that a lot of people who run a lot of these smaller charities in their communities run those charities because they understand their communities and they know what their communities need. And I believe in I've seen a lot of good done from a lot of grassroots types of organizations. I'm not talking about the Salvation Army. I'm not talking about even the United Way. And the United Way is on the local level a very, very good charity. So I would focus on that. I would focus on very small charities that, I'm talking about $5 million and under yearly budgets that are doing very targeted types of help. I would set up some sort of charitable foundation that would provide grants to them. Small town museums, programs. Again, very, very. It's hard to talk singularly about individual charities because I'd have to go find them or I'd have to get them, writing grant letters to me. But that's how I would focus the money if I had that $1 billion.
I want to double click on something, which is the idea that you're focusing on funneling your money through charities.
Yes.
And that's and you're kind of hung up on what kind of charities they would be for the past couple minutes, right? And I think that is fucking awesome, but I don't think it really answers my question. Getting hung up on what charities you're going to put your billions of dollars towards, right? Like you're talking, the strategy that you're talking is one of a millionaire. I'm asking you what you would do if you were a billionaire.
That's fair.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. So you're talking about like a large scale type of project.
Your strategy is not scaling up to what I expect. Like if you had billions of dollars, are you really
okay? You're talking about billion. You're talking about.
Well, yeah, you're a billionaire, dude. What are you doing with it?
I think one of the big things that I would do was hire a lot of lobbyists. I think that I'm serious. I'm absolutely serious. I would hire a lot of lobbyists, and I would get them fighting for things like UBIs. I would fund I would fund campaigns a lot like George Soros does. George Soros does do a lot of leftist funding. Don't get it wrong. Mm-hmm. And fund advertisements and stuff for things like UBIs, for things like higher taxation on the wealthy. Because the truth of the matter is the Kochs are out there with billions of dollars funding it the other way, right? They're willing to give as much money as the NRA wants them to give to NRA-sponsored politicians, for one. That's one thing that the Kochs do a lot of donating towards. The Kochs believe in a lot of offshore oil drilling. And they're funding a lot of politicians who will vote in their favor. So I think that there needs to be more leftist representation in the lobbying space. And people like, you would hire lobbyists? Yeah, I would. But I would hire the right type of lobbyists that would lobby for the things that we actually need in this country. Because we've got to have a counter to these Koch's billions.
I'm totally unsatisfied. Give me a break, Joe. If you were a billionaire, what's the first thing that you would do?
Okay, so
Joe's going to give me the exact answer that I want.
All right, as far as probably not, it may not be the answer you're looking for, but actually, for where I would target money is infrastructure and education in underprivileged areas. Because the thing is, giving money, give people food. That's nice. It's good. And that needs to happen. But it's a one shot deal. It doesn't actually address the problem. It's a Band-Aid. But this is the reason why,
don't go there. It's not a Band-Aid. You supplement that. No, Joe. You supplement that. We're talking nutrition. You supplement that. You're talking about generational changes.
But see, I want to do things that will continue. If it's the whole give a man a fish thing. So what I want to do is I want to create the infrastructure such that there will be fish for everybody on an ongoing basis, not just today.
Well, and lack of roads is actually one of the number one causes of starvation on the planet, because we can't get food to areas in Africa before it goes bad, and they can't farm it themselves. So without the proper that's a good point.
That's right. So infrastructure and education. I mean, yes, you also have to, and then short term, you have to give food, but you have to keep building things that will make it better in the long term. Otherwise, all you're doing is patting yourself on the back, and it's actually kind of like saviorish. It's very patronizing and patronistic. So that's why like one of the charities I deal with is Kiva. They're what they do is then they do micro loans. Now when I put money in, I target manufacturing and agriculture, because again, if you target agriculture, then the people there can grow their own, to whatever degree that is possible, and how arable the land is, the people can then themselves be self-sustaining. Handing them money is nice, but giving them the ability to sustain themselves over the long haul is much better. Heifer International is another great charity that I give money to, that they actually send pregnant animals to various poor places in the world, so that people have these animals, so that they get not just the one animal, but then now they have geese, a flock of geese, or they can grow, they can have cows or whatever, goats, and they can get the milk, and then they can breed and get more, and then that becomes sustainable. Otherwise, I said,
hey, Joe, real quick, be explicit about these places one more time, and Titan, if you're out there, try to find these links to the charities that Joe is talking about.
Yeah.
So the one that you were talking about initially.
Initially was Kiva. And what I like about Kiva gives micro loans. And so what ends up happening is you're loaning money to people, and then they pay it back, and then you just keep loaning it out. So I keep dumping more money in and loaning more money out. And so that's not a true charity but it's basically what it is these are people who would not be able to get loans otherwise. So you're allowing them to get capital so that they can build their business, build their manufacturing, buy supplies, so that, again, they can sustain themselves. Oxfam and Heifer International both do the same thing, where they basically send pregnant animals to these poor areas, and it's everywhere. In Africa and Europe and in Asia and South America, even North America, even in the United States, in some cases. And so it allows people to then again have sustainable source of food, as opposed to just throwing food at them and hoping that somehow the world's going to get better for them. And education, because again, in a lot of these places, both around the world and in inner cities here in the U.S., we know that the educational system is poor. Also in rural America, same thing. The education system is atrocious. So if you start giving people proper education, again, that's something that can help themselves in the future.
If the local politicians would let you. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think infrastructure and education are absolutely fundamental to a functioning society, and to a society that gets better over time, right? Over generations, you want to see a growth of society. You want to see there being more rich people and less poor people and more educated people. That's supposedly that's what government's supposed to be doing for us, but it doesn't seem real good at it lately.
Right. Now, to one thing, to your point, Ethan, now, a lot of people do have a negative view of lobbyists, because it's very easy to point to bad lobbyists. But on the flip side, I always like to point out Mothers Against Drunk Drivers is a lobbyist organization.
Sure. My
daughter-in-law formed one that is an organization that is basically lobbying Congress for assistance for children with special health needs. So my granddaughter was born with a lot of health problems, stuff that
Sure.
And so this foundation, and that her and a bunch of other parents found this foundation,
I've
and they go
and right.
What's it?
Sure.
Yeah,
I've worked for PAC.
So
I wasn't a lobbyist myself, but the people above me were the lobbyists. So
Right. So there are definitely lots of positive lobbying organizations.
Sure.
Hell,
Absolutely.
if you write a letter to your representative or your senator, you're lobbying.
Right. Exactly. It's just, we're talking about paid positions. Sure.
Sure. But we need them too, as you said.
Yep.
So I take your point. I think it's a good point that you made, because I think that's necessary. In order to get the change we need, you need people in the faces of our representatives and our senators to say, no, this is what's necessary.
Yeah, you can tell
Sorry
this
about
is on the
the
4th. I can
background.
hear all the explosions behind you. I keep getting, so I was gonna say,
Yeah,
because you turned down the television. I was like, no, you're not gonna be able to do anything about that. That's
Yeah, Flash is trying to get inside my legs to hide from the
poor dogs. I know. Tell me about it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, was there any? Let's see. Were there any other questions anybody wanted to bat around before we start to wrap this up? Any other comments? Maute's camera is off, so I'm trying to do this before he gets back and throws another one of his. I have a curveball for you that's going to derail everybody.
His patented
for 30 minutes.
curveball.
Yeah, I know. Tell me about it. Oh, dear Lord. All right. Well, so let's see. So, Joe, was there anything else that you wanted to say on either UBI in UBI specifically, or just any sort of anything that we've discussed here tonight in general?
Like I said, I do have mixed feelings about it. I think the day will come when it's necessary. I'm not convinced that we're there yet, but it's worthwhile having the discussion. And like I said, if nothing else, I think the start of it could be replacing all the other assistance programs we have with UBI Lite. And then at least the infrastructure, once people are used to that infrastructure there, it could be expanded in the future as we can and as needed. So I think that has value. And but I think that there's so much. So speaking of infrastructure, there's so much just even here in the U.S. that it needs to get done. It doesn't get done. That's just not getting addressed. But we need to change our priorities as a people. One thing that's really destructive is this mentality that everything has to be built about whether something is good or bad for business, because quite frankly, that's destructive. Secondly, a lot of the things that the people on the right wing seem to think are bad for business, and that in the long run would actually be good for business, because if you did distribute the wealth more evenly, more equitably, that would actually grow the economy way more than their trickle-down crap ever could. So there would be more to go around. The pie can grow. It's not. The wealth is not a constant.
All right. Thank you, John. Thank you very much for joining us. By the way, thank you. Ethan, your final thoughts on UBI or anything that we've been discussing in general?
I think the main thing is we need to raise the floor of the economy. The bottom of the economy has to come up. It's the only way to get a middle class that's strong and healthy again is to raise up the bottom and squeeze it and pull down from the top. And that's how we do it. We raise the bottom, pull down from the top, and we get a stronger middle class. If you're somebody who's earning that, $40,000 to $60,000 a year and you're struggling at any point, it's because the economy is not doing what it's supposed to do. Somebody earning that amount of money should be fine, and currently you're not. And that needs to get fixed.
All right, and Mr. Maute, I don't honestly know if he can hear me or not. Chris, you there? This is where I get to say, well, Nick, it's been a pleasure as always to be on your spectacular show, and it's really the best show. It uses all the biggest words, and it's gold, like Maute likes, and so okay. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. He's going to be a little surprised when I come back and he's out and the show's over. But thank you all for joining us. You gentlemen, we'll be in the Discord afterwards. Will you gentlemen be able to join us for a little while in the Discord?
Yeah,
in case
I'll
anyone
hop
wants
in.
to come in. All right.
Sure,
perfect.
I'll hop in for a couple minutes.
Joe, you're going to be able to join? Okay, perfect. So I'll join in the Discord too.
Yeah, drop the link. Drop the link for the Discord in Skype because I don't know where it is.
I will drop it to you in Skype in just a minute. All right. Well, if you made it this far, hopefully that means you like the show. Again, the algorithm really does matter to us here. So one great way to support this show is to hit the like and subscribe button, and that helps us out a lot. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. We will have Nathan Ormond next week on Tuesday to discuss his deconversion process, and then Dr. Josh will be on the following Thursday to discuss. And I'm looking for both of these shows we've had planned for a while, but the Christian apologetics for the Old Testament, which of course isn't necessarily the Christian book, but without it, you don't have Christianity. So we're going to be discussing that with Dr. Josh. Looking forward to that. That'll be at our usual time, 9 p.m. Eastern. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll catch you in the Discord in a bit. Night all.